Welcome to The Explainer. So, imagine for a second, a city that completely got rid of poverty. Not for a year, not for a decade, but for centuries. Today, we're diving into the story of an ancient society that, according to the records, did exactly that.
We're going to explore the story of the City of Enoch, a society also known as Zion, and our goal is to really try and figure out the principles that made it so incredibly successful.
I mean, this was their crowning achievement, no poor among them. Think about that. In a world where economic inequality is just a constant, that statement sounds almost impossible. So how on earth did they do it?
And get this, it wasn't just some short-lived experiment. This golden age of prosperity and unity, according to the scriptures, lasted for an incredible 365 years. So the source material we're looking at today asks a really simple question. What was their secret?
Well, the argument is that their success was no accident. It was basically engineered on top of two powerful interconnected pillars, a spiritual commitment that unified their hearts, and a unique economic system that unified their efforts.
So let's start with that first pillar, the spiritual one. Now here's what's interesting. The scriptures don't come right out and say, hey, there were temples in Enoch City. But the author of our source makes a really compelling case for why they were not only there, but were absolutely essential.
The logic here is pretty straightforward. If a fundamental sacred ritual or ordinance, like baptism, has been around since the very beginning, well then it just stands to reason that other key temple ordinances would have been known and practiced too.
And this quote right here really establishes a clear, timeless pattern. It suggests that building these sacred houses of worship isn't some new idea, but a commandment that's been given to God's people throughout time, both ancient and modern.
So this deep commitment to sacred covenants with God, this was the first key ingredient. It created a unified people with a really strong shared purpose. But a spiritual foundation needs a practical, economic engine to turn those beliefs into real-world action.
And that brings us right to the second pillar, this divinely inspired economic system that made a society with no poor actually possible.
Now, this was so much more than just being charitable or, sharing a few things. It was a complete rethinking of ownership, of stewardship, and community responsibility, and it was all grounded in their spiritual beliefs.
And these were the core principles. The balance here is just fascinating. The whole foundation is that God is the real owner, and we're just stewards or caretakers of his stuff. Now, that mindset puts a huge value on accountability and hard work, while making sure nobody falls through the cracks. And the key isn't just about giving handouts, it's about empowering people to get back on their feet, all while preserving their dignity and even their private property.
Okay, so that's the theory. But how did these big ideas actually work on a day-to-day basis? How did they put it into practice?
They called this whole process consecration, which is basically a formal act of dedicating your property for a sacred purpose. And it was based on this really practical, documented process. This wasn't some commune where everybody's property just gets dissolved. Instead, it was a system that very carefully balanced that communal commitment with individual responsibility and freedom.
So this is a critical question, right? Anytime you have a system where people are deeding property to a central figure, you have to ask, what kept it fair? What stopped it from becoming coercive?
This insight from Joseph Smith is absolutely key. The entire transaction had to be by mutual consent. The bishop couldn't just force terms on someone, and the individual couldn't make unreasonable demands. If they couldn't agree, the deal was off. This built-in check and balance was designed to keep everything in harmony.
And this reveals a really important point. The system was not about an enforced equality of outcome. It was all about an equality of opportunity. It was really a merit system that provided a safety net while at the same time encouraging and rewarding individual initiative. The more you produced with your stewardship, the more you could contribute back to the whole community. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Let's connect these two massive pillars and see what we get.
The City of Enoch's incredible success really seems to be this powerful fusion of the spiritual and the practical. You have this vertical commitment to God through temple worship that was perfectly paired with a horizontal commitment to their neighbor through the Order of Enoch. One fueled the other, and together they created this powerful, righteous, and completely self-sustaining society.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. In a world struggling so much with inequality and division, what can we learn from a society that, according to the record, eliminated poverty for 365 years by perfectly balancing faith, individual stewardship, and community responsibility?